Hello and welcome to Leviathan News. Today is April 15th. It's tax day. Oh man, it really creeps up on you. I know that I just got some tax bills back for last year and uh, they're not that great. I think the trick is really to not sell and do your taxes early. If it's April 15th and you haven't started doing your crypto taxes, there's a variety of services out there that you can go to. And just make sure to get it done and enjoy tax day as it is. I just want to talk about our sponsors first before we get into the show. Uh, as always, we have a great sponsor in Frax. They're really wonderful in what they've done for us here at Leviathan News. They've been great as a partner, and you can find our token Squid on Fraxtal, which is Frax's L2 in Curve. And there's some really nice incentives that come through the Curve pool for that. Additionally, I want to give a shout out to Paloma Chain. They're going to be an upcoming sponsor as well too. They have a like summer days, 500 days of summer campaign going on right now, where they're going to be creating 500 tokens for their indie games for Paloma's Got Talent, which is where you can take individual creators and generate a token for them so that you can give back to them and trade them as a meme coin. So go check it out. We've had Tarek on before, and let's get into the show. All right, today we have on Seth For Privacy coming back for the second time. Seth, you were on last year, weren't you?
Yeah, I think I came on in the wake of the Samurai Wallet stuff when they got indicted and all of the privacy fallout in the Bitcoin space for that. So that was a fun time.
That's right. And now you're VP at Cake Wallet.
Yeah, it's been an interesting shift. Yeah, I was in the Bitcoin space, crypto space already before that. Obviously, I've been here just kind of as an educator and content creator, podcaster, that kind of thing for a few years now. But I joined Foundation, who are a Bitcoin hardware wallet company. Now it's a little over 2 years ago, but have long been a huge fan of Monero. It's how I got into the space really, and what's kept me in for the long haul. And obviously, my surname is For Privacy, so kind of have an affinity for that kind of thing. So it was an awesome opportunity to jump in at Cake Wallet, helping to run the day to day. Vic, the founder, is just one of the kindest, most generous people in the crypto space I've ever met, and he's built an amazing team. We're really just trying to build the most easy to use self-custodial wallet with all the things you need with privacy at its core. That's a core piece of everything we do. So obviously that was appealing to me, and it's been an absolute blast. Been there about 6 months now. So yeah.
And how was it going back from like marketing essentially, or education as you want to call it? And that's primarily what we're doing with like crypto marketing, is like educating, because these things are so complex.
Yeah.
How is it moving from the kind of content creation side back into product? Because that's always a jump.
Yeah. To be quite honest, I absolutely loved it. I I learned quickly. Like I do enjoy education, but what I learned quickly is that it's only enjoyable to me when it's on my schedule for things that I specifically really care about, without like the pressure of it being my job basically. And I learned quickly. I entered Foundation to be focused on basically like education and content creation, and then quickly moved up and became essentially their head of business dev and marketing, which was like fantastic experience. It was really good, and I use a lot of the stuff that I learned there now as VP at Cake. I do a lot of especially like business dev stuff, but it also just reinforced for me I don't like marketing. Like I don't like the having to fight the social media algorithms, and I don't like that engagement baiting is just like a legit strategy, and just like so much of the stuff that goes into the marketing side, like not education but the marketing side, just drives me absolutely nuts. So it's actually been really fun to get more out of that and more on product, which really has always been my heart. Like I have a technical background. I love actually like building and improving the tools, not just educating about them, but both go hand in hand for me. And one of the cool things with getting to focus more on product is I can build tools that require less education. which is really, I think, the end game. Like I'm not really having to educate anybody on how to use Signal, for instance. Like you just install it, you create an account, you use it. There's nothing there for me to really like create an hour-long tutorial for or something, which is really where I want to get the privacy tools throughout the crypto space to be that good, where essentially I don't want to put you out of a job. I don't want to kill Leviathan News Network or anything, but just like I want to make it so that there's less need for a focus on like how to use these technical things. We don't have to do as much education on that. And instead we can focus more on education around why these things matter and pointing people to the right tools and then understanding that when they pick them up, they'll be able to use them pretty easily.
That's a really good point that you make about. Well, I don't think they will be out of job because there's always drama that's happening in our industry. Somebody's always losing money, or prices are always going up or down. So there's an endless supply of things to talk about. But I hear you when you're talking about like UX UI design and kind of just getting it to the point where like it becomes intuitive for the users. That's a really hard thing to do, especially with trying to obfuscate everything complex that's happening on the back end, which can be an incredibly difficult and technical process. But it's hard. And so, like I commend anybody who's able to do that. The last time that you were on, we were talking about the Samurai Wallet case. Like what's come of that? Has anything happened further in that since we talked?
Yeah, so not really anything impactful yet. They've still been in the discovery process, and just the way that the judicial system in the U.S. works, at least, it's a long process. So they've had some initial hearings. I think we're still a few months away from the first like proper hearings where we'll learn more and learn a little bit more about what the prosecution's going to bring, that sort of thing. I want to say that's June, but don't quote me on that. I can grab you some dates afterwards. Maybe you can check in the show notes, but. Yeah, they're still waiting on the actual trial. One of them is out on house arrest, I think, and one of them's out on bail in Portugal. But yeah, still waiting on that. I mean, on the broader spectrum of what was essentially privacy oppression in the U.S., thankfully, say what you will about this administration, which I know is very divisive in the U.S. At least the relaxation of anti-privacy and anti-crypto regulation and prosecution that we were seeing, that's the level of that has just dramatically decreased. A lot of stuff that was put in place by the previous administration has been killed, and
several administrations, even Trump and Trump 1, right, and then Obama beforehand as well too.
It's true. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I guess we really saw the zenith in the last administration of what that looked like when it was basically an all-out war. But thankfully, the vast majority of that has been rolled back or stopped temporarily right now. So it's a much better environment in the U.S. And a lot of the things that were the kind of the bedrock of the prosecution brought against Samurai Wallet and against Tornado Cash, a lot of the kind of foundational things have been broken down, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the cases will be dropped. So still hoping and pushing for just that the prosecution would drop the cases against Roman Storm, the Tornado Cash dev, and then the 2 Samurai Wallet devs at this point, since there's so little to go on, especially like the Tornado Cash case. All the sanctions have been overturned. There's been really good court rulings against the things that happened against Tornado Cash. So hopefully those will resolve well. But it's a good reminder of, I guess, 2 things. One is build for the adversarial environments. Like these tools need to be resilient so that even when we do have an administration that hates crypto or hates privacy, they don't have as much power to actually shut it down. And just, don't put all our eggs in one basket because things can change quickly. I know that's the way it is in the US and in much of the world, but it's kind of wild how much can shift just administration to administration. So every 4 years we can see a monumental shift in what's going to happen. So we really got to kind of be prepared on the building side and the education side, so people are aware of kind of what could happen, keep people up to date.
Yeah. I mean, I would arguably want to be charged and prosecuted here in the United States versus Europe. Our kind of free speech privacy laws are much stronger than across the pond, and I don't think that developers would have as good of a chance to beat the case if it was over in Europe. I mean, we know that, right? Based on the other Tornado Cash dev who was sentenced to, it was like 4 years in prison.
6
6
years. Yeah. I was going to say that was a good example of why we do still have much better protections here in the U.S. It often can feel like things are falling apart, and I'm absolutely not saying our judicial system is without flaw, because it is deeply flawed, but we do have much better constitutional protections against a lot of the things that we're actually doing when we're building crypto tools, a lot of which comes down to code is free speech, which is a very clearly protected thing in the US.
Right.
So we do have much better protections than most other places in the world, honestly. So it's definitely something to be thankful of and reminded of. But these cases will also be a big part in setting the precedent of how does code as free speech actually apply to the tools that people build in crypto.
Right.
Because if they go poorly, the precedent can basically be that these things don't count as code as free speech because they're also money, or they also involve someone handling money, even if it's not the actual developer. Or if they go well, obviously it will reinforce and really codify the idea that if you're building things that are decentralized or not custodial, that they should be protected under that code as free speech precedent and properly preserved.
Yeah, my understanding out of all this is that really the bulk of the case is going to come down to not the contracts itself, because we've found out from the Tornado Cash case that they've essentially ruled that fully autonomous, trustless smart contracts are not bound by law in the same way that a person is. But if you're running a front end, which in both cases these individuals were, then you move into a different area of legality. Now it's something that you own and that you operate. It has human control, and it just gets a little murkier at that point. And this is where I think the battle is going to be run over the next couple decades. Is who controls the front ends and who's liable for what. And this is really the core argument that a lot of I guess like DeFi people and privacy people as well too, is that like just having a code and allowing people to create transactions themselves is not illegal. Displaying information is not illegal. Helping someone access certain information and create a transaction is not illegal. So I don't know. I think we're going to be getting into some pretty interesting legal challenges as this time goes forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the core of the argument against these prosecutions is that while they did run a centralized service, like Tornado Cash, like you mentioned, they ran the front end for a decentralized smart contract. They never had control of anyone's funds. They never had the ability to take any user's funds or anything like that. So there was no custodial element, which is normally key to the charges they're trying to bring against them. Likewise with the Samurai wallet case, theirs is a little different because it's centralized through and through. There's no decentralized element at all, but it was also non-custodial. So again, they weren't taking anyone's money. They never had custody of anyone's funds, but in both cases, they had some sort of profit motive, and that's kind of the angle that they're taking right now. It's one of the things that, like, in the Bitcoin space, I've been trying to tell people for a long time is there's a critical flaw with doing privacy at the app level and not at the consensus level. Whereas like in Ethereum, we can do it at the consensus level via smart contracts, where there's no ability for a central entity to have total control of that, or for shutting down one entity to prevent something from being used. Tornado Cash was a great example of that. It's continued to be used despite sanctions, despite takedown of the Tornado Cash team, because there was no way to actually prevent that. Whereas on the Samurai wallet side, because it's all done app level, it went away overnight, disappeared, everything gone, everything shut down. No funds lost or anything like that, because again, it was non-custodial, but it's much more susceptible to those issues. That's one of the things that I do like about what's possible on Ethereum. That's one of the reasons why I just continue to be a huge fan of what Monero is doing, because everything is by default at the consensus level. There's no one to go after. Even if you arrested every dev right now, it's going to keep working. It's going to keep letting people transact privately, which is a critical aspect of making these things resistant in adversarial environments.
Okay, let me ask you a question. Post Samurai wallet, where did everybody migrate to? Or is there even a replacement for it?
Yeah, it's tricky in the Bitcoin space. And I've answered this question quite a few times since then, because that was the obvious next question was, okay, I was using Samurai wallet, or I was thinking about it because I do want to care more about my privacy on Bitcoin. What do I do next? And there hasn't really been a good answer. Wasabi wallet was the main competitor before that, but they also shut down all of their centralized services in the wake of the Samurai wallet indictment. They do still build the actual wallet software, but they don't run the CoinJoin coordinator that they ran before. They built it in such a way that other people can run the coordinators themselves, which is interesting and more decentralized. Not really decentralized, but more decentralized, because you can pick a coordinator to use now. Unfortunately, there have been a lot of bugs with theft of funds via fees, with privacy being broken, despite their changes to separate coordinators, some attacks that coordinators can do to break the privacy of mixed participants. There's been some issues there, and they just kind of have issues. So I'm very hesitant to recommend them and people to really rely on them for their privacy. So, I mean, normally what my recommendation has been, and this doesn't fly well in Bitcoin only circles, but in pretty much every other circle works well, is leverage Monero for more of your privacy needs. You don't have to like store your wealth in Monero if you don't want to, even though, as like you mentioned at the beginning of the show, it's actually been one of the better performers this year, even though price isn't something I pay that much attention to. What you can do is you can store your wealth in whatever you want, Ethereum, Bitcoin, and you can just spend for Monero, top up a wallet every month, do that easily in Cake Wallet, and just use Monero as your spending tool, just like you would have a savings account, a checking account. Treat Monero kind of like a checking account. And that has been where I've seen the overwhelming shift, as I've had countless Bitcoiners in person, online, reach out either directly, privately, or publicly, and start that transition to using Monero more and more. Lots of merchants have started accepting Monero in the wake of that, and that's been the overwhelming shift that I've seen so far, is towards using Monero more as a tool for financial privacy, a digital cash, and away from trying to use Bitcoin for everything. The only real option on the Bitcoin side is to lean more into self-custodial Lightning wallets, but those are few and far between.
Fewer and farther
yeah,
in 2025.
It's been getting worse and worse. Most of them are switching to using Liquid basically as the underlying layer, so you're giving up custody there. The ones that aren't really, there's only two options right now that I would recommend, which is Phoenix Wallet, which thankfully is back in the US now, after some of the changes in this administration. So they are re-offering their services. I don't know if they ever actually left, but they at least said that they were leaving. And then Zeus Wallet is another great option for Lightning. But the user experience is just going to be a lot more tricky than something like Monero, because you have to deal with all the liquidity stuff, the channel inbound, outbound. There's just a lot that goes into it, with Phoenix being the most straightforward and the one that I use. And so you get reasonably good privacy assurances from Lightning, but it is not a silver bullet and has a lot of issues with privacy in specific circumstances.
Lightning is one of those issues that just confounds me, because they had a multi-year head start on everything, and they've pretty much faded into irrelevancy at this point. I think with the advent of L2, Solana, all these kind of low cost, low fee ways to shift money back and forth, I have maybe it's just the circles that I run in, as being primarily focused on ETH and other EVM networks, is that I've not seen any like Lightning advocates recently. Like, they've kind of disappeared from Twitter. I don't really see too many updates coming. I know that Lightning had been working on Taro, which would allow for stablecoins to be used in their network.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, it's I don't know if it's unfortunate or just they were outcompeted by different systems.
Yeah, I mean, I think it all kind of comes down to just some core critical flaws with the protocol, in that I think they tried to do way too much with Lightning, mm-hmm. and tried to pitch it, especially in like the altcoin ICO days, like 2016, 2017, 2018. They tried to pitch it as like the solution for everything, where they were talking already about assets on Lightning, talking about Lightning fixing all the privacy issues, Lightning being the solution for high fee environments. And they tried to pitch it as everything, that it could fix all the things. We wouldn't need all these altcoins, wouldn't need all these other approaches, that it would do everything. But it's really, Lightning's terrible at a lot of that. It's an interesting protocol, and it is not without use. But what has become very clear, and I think what has been understood behind the scenes for a long time, is that Lightning is a very poor end user payment experience in the way that was initially envisioned, where you would actually host your own channels, you would actually run your own node, you would use it in this like fully self-sovereign way. And what it is actually good for is it's actually good for settling payments between semi-trusted parties. And it works really well for that, where you're talking about shifting money between exchanges, you're talking about shifting money between yourself and a counterparty that you trust in some way. Obviously, you don't need to trust in the sense of custody, even though there are some ways you can lose money in Lightning. with an untrusted party, but there's just a lot breaks down when you try to do this. Like, I host my own channels and I can pay anyone anywhere. Like that model is just not tenable. It's never going to work. What is actually going to work is using it as a interoperability layer between different things. And that finally the Bitcoin space is shifting to that and understanding that like the end user is not going to use this for the most part. Those that do are going to use what they call a Lightning service provider, which is essentially offloading all of the work to a third party and just holding self-custody of the keys. And that's basically the Phoenix model right there. That's the only thing that's really tenable, but that also has a lot of privacy downsides and potential loss of funds risks and stuff like that. So to me, it was really trying to pitch like, we don't have a solution for all these things, but we have Lightning. Let's make Lightning the solution for all these things. And that scope creep was brutal, and has finally started to become clear that it's not going to actually fix those problems.
I fully agree with you. Unfortunately, Lightning was made so early in the cycle, or like three cycles ago, that it could not foresee the rise of stablecoins. Even when ETH came out, people pointed at ETH's high fees and that it was still like proof of work chain, that it was very similar, and that Lightning could still like gain market share over it. But then all the L2s came and all the stable coins came, and a big reason why people use Lightning, like you said, was to transfer Bitcoin between exchanges. So if you're running a fund and you need to move some money back and forth quickly, Lightning's great, right? OKX and Binance probably have channels open that are like deep and can be filled at relatively large size, and it just makes sense for that. But like outside of that, like you were saying with the self-hosted, I run my own channels, especially with the variability of Bitcoin's fees as well too. Closing a channel or even opening a channel during the high fee times is can be more expensive than than it's actually worth of what the yield that you would make. So yeah. So I'm oh right. Sorry, I got a little off kilter there to go talk about Lightning. But yeah, that's interesting that you talk about like the wallet side, right? So for your guys' with Cake Wallet, you guys have like integrated Monero into Cake. It's like one of the core currencies that you can like denominate your portfolio in.
Mm-hmm.
My question is like, if I have ETH or if I have BTC and I want to do what you were talking about, which is spend Monero as a way to keep my funds private, like what is that step-by-step process that I would need to take to move either of those assets into Monero and then spend it?
Yeah. I mean, it's super straightforward. So, I mean, the core model of Cake Wallet is being able to have wallets for all of the popular cryptocurrencies. You could have Ethereum, Solana, Bitcoin, and Monero, all using the same 12-word seed if you want. Obviously I wouldn't do that with like all of your life savings, but especially for like your hot wallets, it's really nice to be able to have one 12-word seed that you back up. You have all your wallets out of that one. And then when you need to top up your Monero, you just hit swap, which is on the home screen of Cake Wallet. You choose what you're going to swap it to. You can automatically populate an address from one of your other wallets that's in Cake Wallet, so you don't have to copy and paste or deal with any of that mess. You hit swap, and you get a provider by best rate. We do all the checks in the background to pick the best provider. Most of these are centralized. They're all centralized for Monero right now specifically, because none of the decentralized exchanges support Monero because there's a little bit more complexity there. That is going to change. There's actually someone in the Monero community building something called Sarai, which is similar in concept to Thorchain, but implemented in a quite a different way. And it will have Monero, Bitcoin, and Ethereum support at launch. But right now, all of the Monero swap providers are centralized, just instant exchangers. And so, you just hit swap. We'll construct the transaction for you to actually send to the right address and everything. Again, you don't have to copy and paste addresses back and forth. And then it ends up in the wallet you've selected to the address that you selected. It depends on the provider, usually within 10 to 20 minutes max. The actual process, if you like starting the swap, takes like 20 to 30 seconds. It's really straightforward. So it's not complex at all. And that's really one of the one of the main things we've been building around is like we have quickly understood that this is like it's a multi-crypto world. We're not in a Bitcoin only, we're not in an Ethereum only, we're not in a Monero only world. We're in one where people have specific things that each ecosystem does best. Bitcoin does things that Ethereum doesn't do well. Ethereum does things that Bitcoin doesn't do well. Monero does things that both of those don't do well. They all, I think, can work together very symbiotically, and the majority of people in the space, even if they don't talk about it publicly, are living that multi-crypto life. So we've really built around that to easily enable swapping between all of your favorite currencies. And then the kind of like cherry on top, so to speak, is that we also have Cake Pay, which you can easily spend your crypto for gift cards or debit cards and be able to actually use your crypto in the real world. So that's a good extra way to be able to pay. That's no ID required, no KYC, privacy preserving as well. So like I said, everything is very privacy centric at the core of what we do.
That's pretty cool. Wait, so I can swap my Monero into like Amazon cards and then use them?
Yep. Super straightforward. All in app as well. We'll have right now, it'll be delivered via email. So it's not like a totally seamless experience. You'll get it via your email, and then obviously it's just a gift card you can redeem. But probably within the next month or so, we'll have all in-app redemption. So you'll just choose your card, say how much. Again, we'll hope to construct the details of the transaction. You just approve it and sign. And then immediately you'll get the gift card directly in app with the barcode. If it's something you'd use in person, like Lowe's here in the US is a popular one for using in person. You could be in the checkout, say how much you need, get the gift card, you have the barcode, scan it, move on with your life, and never have to actually convert to fiat directly, but spend it directly. Yeah, you can do that directly with gift cards. And then by far our most popular option is just buying debit cards specifically with it, because then you can use that anywhere. Apple and Google Pay support. We don't have reloadable cards right now, so it is one-time purchase. Like you'd buy a $500 card and then use it down until there's nothing left, and then you'd buy another one later on. But that's a really popular option for us as well.
It's pretty interesting. I know that I had spoken to the Fold team, and they have some similar options like this. But you guys are fully open source and fully non-custodial.
Yep.
Which
yep.
is
all self-custody, 100% open source, always have been and always will be. So yeah, that's another thing of ours is we're not going to integrate anything that's custodial. So you always know that if you're using it, it's something that's self-custodial through and through. Obviously, like when you're paying for a gift card, you're sending your crypto to someone else because obviously you're paying for something, but you always hold the keys no matter what. And yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting how Monero's been able to maintain itself even throughout all these different cycles. There isn't really a replacement for it outside of. I mean, there's not really a replacement for it. Arguably, I know that we've had some guests on, like the Railgun guys, or some of the other privacy-focused L2s out there that would make the claim that using their systems is like equal to Monero, but I think there is some like core foundational issues which like you sacrifice by moving away from that. Like how would you look at the Monero community? Is it pretty ossified at this point, or are they like building out new like improvement protocols?
Definitely still building improvements. So yeah, I mean, it's the Monero community. One of the things that I've always loved is that they are not against improvements to the protocol that align with the vision of what Monero is. So obviously we're not just going to like implement anything into the consensus layer, but what we will do and have done for years is that we're just going to keep improving the privacy that Monero provides, no matter what. Because one of the hard things to keep in mind is like when you're building something, let's say like Bitcoin's base layer, you are transparent by design. You're not even trying to have privacy at the Bitcoin's base layer. So you're not in the privacy arms race where you're trying to keep up with the new techniques and the new surveillance methods and the new targeted attacks that are coming out. Whereas when you're talking about Monero, like the core offering and the core reason why someone uses it is because they want financial privacy. So we've constantly been improving the protocol over the last 11 years now to stay ahead of what the latest things Chainalysis are doing, what the latest things the nation states are doing to try and keep providing the best financial privacy possible without you having to do anything extra. And we actually have a hard fork coming maybe later this year, maybe early 2026, which will improve the last remaining like weakness, I would say, of Monero's privacy protocol. Right now, it's something called ring signatures, which basically means that when you send a transaction, you're saying I am one of the 16 inputs in this transaction, but you don't reveal which one of the 16 you are, which is good privacy, especially against general surveillance, but can break down in some like targeted attack scenarios. So what's going to be happening is we're going to be implementing something called full chain membership proofs. Basically, just what that means is when you create a transaction now, you just say, I am one of the outputs that exist on Monero's chain, which is like 100 million possibilities right now. So you go from one of 16 to one of 100 million, and it basically completely stop all of the targeted attacks that are known right now against Monero with the weaknesses in ring signatures. So that's coming soon and is an example of how Monero just continues to keep improving and iterating and staying ahead of the financial privacy arms race, so to speak.
Wow, that's a massive increase in the amount of the set that's used for each transaction. Just for anybody listening at home, when you're dealing with privacy, especially this type of privacy like Monero or Railgun, who we mentioned as well too, we talk about it in terms of the set. So if you have, say, 20 people that are engaging in a transaction that all kind of want to be blinded at the same time, it might be possible with enough deduction to figure out who is who. But if you increase that set to 1,000 or 10,000, or like you said, Seth, to 100 million, then it becomes near impossible because you have to be able to map every single participant at all times and know exactly when funds are coming out in and out. I think there's some like that becomes very hard. Most of the mistakes that people make are like human errors when it comes to privacy. It's not really the technical protocols.
Yeah,
You
and
know,
that's one of the downsides I've seen like on the Ethereum side, because you're trying to add privacy onto what is a transparent by design base layer that, like, when we talk about Tornado Cash, it provided fantastic privacy when you're in Tornado Cash itself, but where we saw some estimates were as high as like 60 to 70% of users were able to be traced through Tornado Cash was because they were doing things where they were like withdrawing from Tornado Cash back to the same Ethereum account they deposited from, or they were funding the new Ethereum account with Ethereum from the account they had deposited from, or they were doing it in the exact amounts that they had deposited before, and they were the only one who had deposited 0.312784 ETH. Like these kinds of things are easy to happen when you're going back into a transparent system. And that's not to say that something like Tornado Cash isn't useful, because it can provide fantastic privacy, but there's just a lot of like what I would call foot guns, where you can shoot yourself in the foot by not thinking through holistically what privacy looks like. And that's one of the advantages I think something like Monero has, is its base layer is private by default. So whatever you're doing, you know that you're getting back to a good level of privacy. And then building on top of that, you can have very good privacy assumptions, where things get a little bit trickier in the Ethereum space. So that's why things like I like a lot of what the Rogan guys have done. I've long been a fan of Tornado Cash as a protocol and concept, but it is very tricky for like the average individual to use it properly without just undoing all of the things that they've done before. And that's one of the reasons why I advocate so much for Monero as kind of the end tool, the thing that you're actually spending from, because not only do you have that strong financial privacy, but you also have very broad merchant acceptance of Monero directly. So you're not having to go into something transparent or give up that privacy somehow to actually use that money, which I feel like you often have to do with something like a Tornado Cash or a Railgun. You're often not being able to spend directly within those protocols, but you're having to go back out to something else to actually use that money for something. And that's oftentimes where kind of the pitfalls happen of privacy issues.
if I'm a merchant and I want to accept Monero, like what is that process? How can I start doing that?
Yeah, it depends on exactly what your requirements are. Like if you want to do everything in a self-custodial way and you don't want any middlemen, BTC Pay Server is like by far the predominant Bitcoin payment processing tool, all open source, really easy to self-host. And they have native support for Bitcoin, obviously, Lightning, Ethereum, pretty much most of the major cryptocurrencies, as well as Monero. And that's the primary way that I see people supporting Monero as merchants. That is more generally for like the harder core merchants, because that means you're actually getting Monero at the end of the day. You're actually getting Bitcoin or Ethereum at the end of the day. And I know that a lot of merchants actually want to have fiat. They don't want to actually settle in cryptocurrency on their end, and they just want to be able to accept cryptocurrency and settle to fiat. So there are ways you can do that with BTC Pay server, but it's a little more convoluted. For people who want to go straight to fiat and have kind of the normal payment processor experience, now payments is the best solution for Monero right now. There's not many payment processors that actually go directly to fiat with Monero, because there's not many exchanges that support Monero because of regulators and governmental overreach, even though there's nothing illegal about supporting or accepting Monero in any jurisdiction that I know of. But that's the best one, and I know multiple people that use now payments. Hopefully we'll have another big one to announce in the next month or so of a big participant in the privacy space that's accepting Monero via now payments, and it's a good solution there. So it's usually pretty straightforward. It depends on exactly what your needs are, but between something like BTC Pay server and something like now payments, that covers the vast majority of merchant use cases, and is very little additional hurdle. Like the Monero support specifically is I have a guide for it, but it even just got easier. You basically just enable a plugin now in the BTC Pay interface, and you have Monero support. And then on the now payment side, it's a simple, like, trusted third party. So you're creating an account and setting that up and linking it to exchanges and stuff, and then they're handling it for you. It's very easy. Yeah, it's not that complex.
Do you have support for that through Cake Wallet?
So, I mean, you could do like a very simple point of sale system where you just type in the amount you want in fiat. In Cake, on the receive screen, you can type in, like, if I want $15 of Monero for the item I'm selling, you just type that in, and it'll change the QR code, have the right amount of Monero in the QR code to make it really simple. So, like, you can do that. We don't have like we're not integrating with e-commerce platforms or something. We're a self-custodial mobile wallet at the core. So our focus is that. But for like a simple POS, you can definitely do that. Like at a conference this last year, Monerotopia was in Mexico City, and we had a bunch of merchants, local merchants, come in. I think like 200 merchants or something came in, and they all accepted Monero via Cake Wallet for the entirety of the event. So we just helped them get set up on Cake Wallet, showed them how to use that simple receive screen, and then most of them settled out to fiat at the end. They wanted to find people to sell their Monero for fiat, understandably. I mean, as a random citizen in Mexico City, like, you probably don't have too much use for Monero day to day, unfortunately, at this point. But yeah, they were able to do that just all via Cake Wallet. So it's good for that kind of like simple use case. But for something more complex, like you're running an e-commerce store or something, you'd want something like BTC Pay or now payments.
What's Monerotopia like?
The Monero community is always always interesting. So it's fun. Like Monerotopia specifically, I feel like is very different. The guy who organizes that, Doug, has his own podcast called Monero Talk, and he takes a very different approach to organizing it. It's very relaxed and very it's just very different. Like in Mexico City, it was like an outdoor venue, all open spaces, and like I said, we had a big focus was on bringing in merchants from the local community to just be able to sell whatever they wanted for Monero. Vendors, all the food was sold for Monero, food and drinks. So that it's very different. I would say like the two main Monero conferences are MoneroCon, which is a more technical one that happens each year around June. This year it's end of June, I think, in Prague. And then Monerotopia is just an even more relaxed, like basically anything goes kind of conference. That one's very different. MoneroCon's more my speed, where it's more technical presentations, people building on and improving Monero, companies working on Monero in the space. And that one's usually a little bit more structured and more like what you'd expect. It's very cypherpunk. Like everything in the Monero ecosystem is going to be very cypherpunk and low key, with a heavy focus on like actual use and technical improvements. Because we're very much against the culture of number go up or price appreciation being the core of what we do. And generally there's not this feel of like we have to push for mass adoption. It's very much an idea of like we want these tools to be the best possible for the people that do wake up and realize that they're there. So it's a very different experience than most conferences, but I really like them.
Is there like an average Monero enjoyer?
It's hard to gauge, honestly, because like I feel like just like with most ecosystems, most communities, you you hear from the most vocal ones and you have kind of a stereotype,
Yeah.
but then there's a massive subset that are just users that aren't out screaming on Twitter, that aren't going to a conference and buying stuff with Monero. They're just everyday normal users. So I feel like it's hard to get like a good cross section of Monero people. I think like my kind of concept of it from the events I've been to is like it draws in a lot of academia because there's very interesting cutting edge cryptography and dev work that's happening around Monero, because it's really kind of pushing the boundaries in a lot of the actual technical details. So it draws in a lot of people that have an interest in that. But then more broadly, I mean, for understandable reasons, it draws in people who are much more conscious of privacy issues. So
Yeah.
you get everything from just people like me who are regular people who really want to see better privacy for everyone, but I'm not some privacy nut or paranoid or anything like that. And you get people all the way down the spectrum to like people who don't exist online and live in cabins in the woods, and the people who are like really hardcore anonymous people who go to great lengths. So you certainly get like an interesting bag of people in the Monero community. And unfortunately, like any other niche community, you get some crazy people and problematic people. And with the privacy angle, sometimes you get some people doing things that they shouldn't. But it's a decentralized tool, and it's not really a way to stop that, which is part of the purpose. But
Yeah.
the Monero community generally does a pretty good job of keeping things focused from the community perspective, especially at events.
It's okay. It's okay. I lean into stereotypes for crypto people. You know, like the Bitcoiners are just a bunch of like tradcaths, like devising plans for their Bitcoin citadels that they're going to live in 20 years from now. And the Ethereum people are just a bunch of like unicorn shirt wearing, like hippy dippy people, you know, like trying to save the world with EVM. And then the Solana bros are just like ripping bong hits and like gambling on meme coins.
Sounds pretty fitting.
Yeah.
Your stereotypes may be on point.
And then yeah, I mean, I had a little bit different idea in my head, but you know, I think you set the tone straight. It's like for the Monero community, it's a bunch of like tinfoil hat conspiracists. Like I live in a cabin in Alaska, but I come out twice a year to come visit you guys.
That and then the nerds. You have this weird cross section of like the hyper privacy nuts, and then the nerds who just want to mess with the cool math and stuff.
And then the feds.
Yes,
Are there feds there?
The feds.
Are there feds at the event?
I mean, not in suits and ties, but
you can answer.
We can all be honest.
You can be honest in this podcast.
I've had some very interesting conversations with people who may or may not have been employed by the United States federal government. I certainly don't have any confirmation on that, but there are some very interesting conversations and situations that come up that feel suspect. So.
Are the Chainalysis guys there?
I mean, they're like hated by the community, so normally not publicly are there. I know that like there's been a lot of interactions in the past, but I don't think like at a conference you would see people like that. But definitely, there's definitely people who are both just idiots trying to push the line in terms of legality that are there, and there's also people that seem to be setting traps, so to speak, there as well. Just like you, I mean, anything that's like on the cutting edge and a niche, you're gonna have some interesting participation. And I think like the most interesting experience I ever had that's kind of along these lines was I went to a conference called Guns and Bitcoin. It was like 2020 or 2021. It was all about 3D printed guns and Bitcoin. Really? So it was like even more niche, and pretty much everybody who started the presentation, it was an
all
odd
feds.
combo.
It was all feds.
There were definitely feds there. And every person who started their presentation about whatever 3D printed gun thing they would do always had like a long legal disclaimer, and it was just hilarious to see like how everyone acknowledged like there are feds here. We understand we're not doing anything illegal, and we're going above and beyond to show that. But yeah, there was definitely a general acknowledgement there were some feds there. So it's always fun.
You know, the confluence of 3D printed guns and Bitcoin is probably higher than most other communities. If there's any one type of community, it shares a lot of the same like prepper idealism, or prepper, not even idealism, but prepper dystopianism, where, you know, in the future, we're going to have to retreat to our citadels and print our own 3D guns. And I've got 5 years of baked beans and and rice in the basement so that I can get away with my family. I've got my what's the bag called that you make that
Go bag.
yeah, your go bag. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Not that I would know. Yeah, I think the other like legitimate crossover too is both cryptocurrency and stuff like 3D printed guns are so cutting edge and out there that they draw people who just want to like build cool shit. And like that was like the clearest crossover to me is like even the 3D printed gun people, most of them didn't seem like prepper kind of anti-government, that kind of person. They were just
Oh
like,
yeah.
we want to build really cool things. We love guns. Why wouldn't we build really cool guns that we can print ourselves? And like that was most of the cross section. And I think a lot of people have been drawn into the crypto ecosystem, especially like devs and educators and that kind of thing, because there's so much stuff here that you could never do anywhere else. Like I'm not going to go work at a bank and get to do any of this cool stuff. You're just going to be stuck in a cubicle doing boring stuff all day. So like I think that's another big part of the draw that does make that cross section between Bitcoin and 3D printed guns specifically close. It's people who just want to build and use really cool things, whether or not someone else approves of it.
I mean, it's all in the same line, really. It's like, this is all code. And at what point does the code, especially in these legal gray areas, morph into criminal liability or civil liability in the case of Bitcoin? Same for Bitcoin as well, too, in terms of criminal liability. Like, what are those edge cases that we can really like define out, or maybe we can't, right? Because like with the 3D printed guns, like from my understanding, is like you have a piece of steel and you start cutting away at it, and at some point, if it becomes a lower receiver, that is now illegal, right? But like, how much?
It's actually
Like,
not illegal. It's actually not illegal.
It's not. It's not. I thought. Wait, is it the lower? It's the upper receivers, right?
It neither technically are legal for you to produce at home for your own use. And this is getting like beyond even my expertise or knowledge, but the line that I know of that's the legal barrier is that you can't actually sell or distribute printed weapons generally because you're not a licensed. I don't know. I can't remember what the correct term is, but a licensed manufacturer of weapons. So you can't actually distribute it, but you can, like, there is nothing illegal with 3D printing your own gun, whether it be an entirely 3D printed gun or with like finishing an 80% lower, which is the normal thing you're talking about, where you get one that's mostly done, but not all the way. So it's not technically a legal firearm yet. And then you finish it at home. There's nothing illegal with that. It's just a weird gray area. That's where a lot of people in the 3D printed gun space have been kind of trying to push the envelope to show like how ridiculous the laws right now are. Both from the perspective of what things aren't allowed. There's some craziness with what the ATF does in the US, and what things are allowed sometimes make no sense because the laws are so out of date that they don't take into account what's actually possible with the technology now. But yeah, sorry to take that on a tangent.
No, I mean we're like I'm really excited that we're in this new administration. I think that we've punished builders for too long, especially in these kind of gray areas. Like we're not going to build the next generation of weapons. We're not going to build the next generation of nuclear plants if some like random kid can't build a nuclear reactor in his basement, right? And we're not going to have the future of money if someone can't, design open source Bitcoin software that allows them to do some interesting things, which might be in a gray legality.
Yeah. I mean, regulation is the death of innovation, and that's what we've seen. I think things stalled a lot over the last 4 years as people just got more and more terrified of like what's going to actually happen if I ship this code, versus just being able to ship it with an understanding that, like, that's the crazy thing too, is like the things like Tornado Cash and Samurai did, they weren't in a gray area. From what everyone thought and what everyone knew of what the US government had said before, they were 100% above board, because what they had done is make sure that they met all of the regulations and guidelines that had been published, and custody was normally the bar there. Like normally if you were a custodian, it's either gray area or it's just very clear you need to be a licensed custodian. And if you weren't a custodian, you were good to go and you were protected under code as free speech. And that's where it got weird, is like what we thought was a very clear delineating line. The Department of Justice said, nope, the line's actually here, without any regulation or statements or anything to make that clear until they arrested people. And that's what I think was most crazy with that. But when that happens, like you said, it destroys any innovation, because who's going to go out and build the that new thing that they were thinking about, if there's a chance they get thrown in jail because they publish code, like
Yeah.
it means the death of a lot of the entrepreneurial and innovative spirit in the US specifically, but then all the things that we do in the US generally cascade to the rest of the world as well.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for you specifically at Cake Wallet, we just had the death of the broker rule. I think a week or two ago, 10 days ago, Trump signed that law and had wide bipartisan support. I believe it was like 71-29. Great news for us because now DeFi protocols don't have to issue tax forms to everyone who uses their software. And for open source wallets like yourself, like it would have essentially like forced you to do KYC on your users or shut down, right? And that's untenable.
Yeah, it would have destroyed, I mean, countless businesses. I mean, it would be almost impossible to run any sort of a business in the US that at least tries to preserve their users' privacy. And I mean, how many people are going to use a self-custodial wallet that they have to KYC for? Like not even looking at the privacy angle. Like obviously there's a large swath of people who care about the privacy implications of that, but just the user experience implications. To go from create wallet, save seed at most, a lot of wallets are starting to find really innovative ways of working around actually writing down those 12 words, to working wallet. And then now you would have to go create wallet, all this ID application, wait for approval, then finally save your seed. But what happens when you go to restore the seed? You have to then re-verify your identity. Is the identity connected to your seed phrase? How can you do that without it would make it almost impossible to actually use crypto.
Yeah.
If that was actually to pass. So that was fantastic to see that died. It never was like fully a thing, but just the fact that it was something that was being proposed was terrifying and was certainly something that would have destroyed a lot of companies or would have ensured that no company is going to be in the US that would ever want to deal with any of this stuff, which is also very bad for America. Not that I care that much about America specifically, but yeah.
Well, my belief is that like Chainalysis and the IRS, I don't know, Chainalysis and all the other ones, they probably have all this like pieced together already. And if you're not breaking the chain, then it's really easy for them to find out like who you are and kind of associate wallets with you. Well, we're getting to the top of the hour and we're going to have to wrap up. But Seth, I really appreciate you coming on today, and everybody that's listening at home. I have another person joining.
The curtain, the person behind the curtain.
The person behind the curtain's coming. Yeah. But thanks everybody for joining, and we will see you a little bit later today.
Thanks for having me, Sam.
As well too. Thanks so much, Seth, and thanks for everybody at home for tuning in. And you can follow us at Leviathan_news, both on Twitter and Telegram, and we will see you again soon.